So, welcome again to the podcast for the second time. A question that we ask all of our guests at the start to just kind of warm them up into the process. Not the creative juices, because, it's not what we're doing here, but just to kind of get the conversation flowing. What's one novel or book that you've read that everybody should read and why?
Ooh, Hamish, now you tested me. My instinct draws to The Kite Runner.
Ooh.
I would say The Kite Runner because, especially for like a Western audience, there was a lot of ignorance and things like that about sort of the events that were going on in Afghanistan at the time. And I'd still say even today, a lot of people my age are quite unaware of it. And I think it's quite harrowing, but also important to know because it's one of those things that sort of makes you appreciate as a Western reader how much more developed our society has become. And it's one of those things that it's not really in our heads a lot, but I think it's really important to sort of value the things we take for granted. And that's what it did for me because I read it at quite a young age. And it sort of opened my eyes and gave me a bit of a fresh perspective of sort of how lucky we are.
I think this is my favourite question because everybody has such wildly different answers. Like Angus said, his Dark Materials, but I think that might be my favourite answer yet because I think we have such a Eurocentric bubble of what the world is and what life is and the journey that it goes in, and particularly that arc of I start here and I finish here.
Yeah, exactly.
And these are the checkpoints I need to go on the way. So I think that's a really good pick. And I'm sure that I have to bleep the name out, but I'm sure that Matt would really appreciate this selection. So moving away from novels and to more tangible change, what then is something that you as a person would like to see more of in the world? It can be a who.
Pardon?
It can be a who. It can be a someone.
Oh, who? Who would I like to see more in the world?
Well, or what? Spouses always say their partner because, otherwise.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a really sort of cop-out answer, but just conflict. Like, I'm a very anti-confrontational person. I just think a lot of the times when you see across social media and stuff, there's just conflict for the most ridiculous reasons and such superficial reasons. It's just conflict for the sake of it. And I think it just seems like a waste of everyone's time to spend our lives just arguing with each other and disagreeing over sometimes important matters, but a lot of the time quite trivial things.
Okay, I think that's a good answer. I can agree with you. I call it doom scrolling.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Yeah.
Because the more you read, the more angry you become. And I think that speaks to a larger thing, which is probably confirmation bias, which is, for me personally, I think that, I go onto Instagram and I see NFL post, meme. I'm surrounded by things that I want to see all the time. And as such, I have to go elsewhere to find new and refreshing opinions and takes. But then... you kind of end up...
It's incredibly easy to just stay comfortable and sort of believe whatever you see because you choose to see it and not sort of push your perceptions. I think.
So could you say something else you want to see in the world then is maybe a curiosity to understand things on a deeper level?
Yeah, and also sort of... I think there's a sort of a rush of information, like everyone has to be first at the cost of it actually being right or not. And there's just so much information going around, it's hard to sort of filter out the truth from the exaggeration, from the hyperbole.
I love that Denzel
and it's
quote.
Quite frustrating to see. Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about that, the Denzel Washington quote, yeah. It's just it's sort of overtaken because it comes down to numbers, it comes down to hits. Like we see it because obviously like the NFL and stuff, the two biggest pundits I can think of in ESPN, Stephen A and Max, they make their living off saying controversial, ungrounded opinions because that's what people hear because it makes them angry.
And first as well.
Yeah, first, yeah.
Who gets to take first? And I think that journalism is something that has... I mean, what would you define journalism as now?
I've got absolutely no clue how to define, because I actually know a lot of people at university who are studying journalism. I was very interested in studying it, and then I thought, if I'm being realistic about it, journalism today has become something very soulless. Like I said, very superficial, very sort of, I don't know. It's not as much about the information. It's just more about attention.
Right.
Which is, I don't know. I don't know how to put it quite into words.
I see what you mean. It is a hard thing to express. But if you think about what the foundation principle is, disbursement of the truth, and it's that idea of truth that I feel is so lost.
Oh, definitely.
And who the truth is for as well. You know, even the idea that you can have corporate journalists seems in itself kind of contradictory. You know.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like that thing about Jeff Bezos and how he owns the Washington Post or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he essentially threatened to fire people who posted slanderous things about Amazon in the Washington Post. So it's to what extent are we actually getting unfiltered truth? Very quite a scary thought, actually.
It is. Because
there we are.
But because actually I was talking about this with Angus in history, and one of the things that I think is so interesting is this idea of going back, and if I could go back in time, I would want to go to those events that have been heralded as, Caesar getting stabbed. Did he say "te brute"? What are the actual founding moments of these wider stories? And are they just really inert and shit, I don't know, somebody tripped and hit their head? Or are they as grandiose as kind of legend makes them out to be? And I guess that kind of leads to the next question, which would be, as a follower of a lot of sports, as someone who at least takes enjoyment in that, would you say that celebrity culture and athletes are the closest thing that we have to modern mythological titans?
I would say yes, because I think even if you look at people with a more tangible sense of power, there's not as much widespread love for them as there is for athletes and stuff and things like that. And I feel like the influence of athletes is surprisingly levels above that of political figures, just because political figures always seem to spark controversy, whereas athletes tend to more unite people and bring people together. And I do think it's something which may not be right, but if you think about, in the sense that we're valuing people that play games and not people that are necessarily trying to progress and change the world. But in the same vein as that, these people, a lot of people who are in the search for power through exploitation and things like that. And a lot of athletes don't come from very affluent or very successful backgrounds. And I think that's why we identify with them more as well. It's sort of like a rags to riches story.
So do you think that there is a meritocracy there, or that it is just luck of the draw?
I think, what, with athletes?
Yeah.
I think you have to sort of marry the two things together, because there is a luck of the draw in the sense of knowing the right people. So it's never a pure meritocracy. However, I think it's one of the more meritocratic structures that we have in society.
Would you want to see a more meritocratic society? Or do you think that puts too great a pressure on to be good at something?
Oh, that's a tough question, Hamish. That is a bloody tough question. I think on a very base level, a meritocratic society is very desirable, but there still needs to be accommodation and facilitation for the people that aren't the very best at everything they do, whatever that may be, because we can't have every field dominated by the people who are the very best at it and then not have room for anyone else, because the whole point of meritocracy is there are fewer people at the top. So, there needs to be, Yeah.
We're only in a place where, the argument is that disparity of wealth and success. But then I think it is also very challenging sometimes to look at a passion or a love and say, well, my talent isn't per se what's going to get me a career in this that can support pursuing that passion. Which I guess kind of leads into the next topic, which would be, as someone who's training to be a lawyer, what's something that you know now that you didn't as a regular civilian that you would say, that you would turn someone around in the street and say, hey, do you know this?
Ooh. I think there are a lot of things that I would turn someone around the street and say, hey, do you know this? I think my sort of, from going to like school and then going to university, is just, for me, I've just learned a lot more about valuing myself and becoming more independent in myself. It's not to say in a selfish way, but it's sort of put yourself first and prioritize your personal development. So, for example, like, I'm at university, but I live like a bit of an old man. Like, I can't remember the last time I went to bed after 12. Like, I get up and I work hard and then I go to bed. Like, I think that's lost on a lot of people nowadays, but it's been very valuable for me, especially like over lockdown and stuff. I feel like it's been very valuable to sort of put, because I'd not say that I was a completely selfless person before I came to uni, but I sort of thought I'll just like prioritize hanging around with other people, like being sociable and things like that. And there's always going to be time to do that. But it's only when I thought like I need to just knuckle down because it's a taxing degree. It's like, it's going to set me up for my life, hopefully. That I thought, time to put me first for a bit.
So, on that kind of subject of you then, what are the difficulties of establishing an identity for the first time away from home?
I think having the commitment to it, because I think the student life, like, you don't have a lot of money. There's always time to like mess around with your mates or stuff. You live in a house full of like people your own age and stuff. I think the most important is having the commitment and the discipline to it, saying, I might not want to do this right now, but I need to do it because it's going to benefit me for the rest of my life. And I think for me, I don't think that I had that until sort of post first year, because post first year I was very much willing to just sort of put everything on hold and just sort of think, oh, that's later Joe's problem or whatever. And I thought, actually, every day is sort of like a building block, and if I can achieve these things every day, I'm going to stand so much further ahead of the people that I might be competing with. And so I think that perspective has been very valuable for me, especially because I've sort of, this year, I've had some problems with my modules. So essentially I'm doing double the amount of work this term than I was doing last term. So I'm a bit busy at the minute, but yeah.
Well, I think that's a great answer, because there is kind of this idea that university is really a place to find yourself, but the fact that can come actually not just through getting shit-faced and going out and meeting new people, but through actual personal growth and development is, I'm sure, really encouraging to a lot of people who will be endeavouring on that journey in the near future. I think this kind of leads to the next question, which would be, what's it like growing up with an eccentric personality?
Are you asking me? Okay, Hamish. Well, I would say, I don't know if I have an eccentric personality, but I would say that I'd say I'm quite confident. I would say that the thing I'm most prepared to do is make myself look like an idiot, because like life's too short to take yourself seriously. I also think that you've got to be quite thick-skinned, because I don't if I were talking about myself in the third person, because I don't really like saying this about me, but if I was saying like someone met me, they'd be like, oh, this guy's like quite confident or whatever. Like people who make little sniping comments about whatever, and to be honest, I think I'm quite good at shaking it off. I think I've never tried to change my personality, which I think is quite important. Like you meet a lot of people nowadays who will sort of completely change depending on who they're with. I think a lot of people that know me will know that I'm the same with everyone, which I think obviously changing slightly, but for the most part, you're gonna know if I'm in the room, hopefully, and I'm not gonna be like especially different, which I quite like about myself, I'd say. And I'd just say, just be true to what you think is right. Like I don't really feel the need to change for anyone else. I've had people like going on work. I went on a work experience. People were saying we didn't like this about your appearance or whatever. It's not really stopped me. It was when I went to quite a big law firm for some work experience, and I went with nearing, and they didn't like that. But like, I didn't care. Do you know what I mean?
Can't name drop them, but fair enough.
Yeah, I'm not going to drop them, but yeah, like it's just things like that. Like I'm not going to.
You're true to who you
myself.
are, and I think it's nice.
Exactly.
It's nice that you say that, because it's kind of a common theme that's emerging, which is and not taking yourself too seriously. What advice would you give to people who feel that weight of the world on their shoulders? What when you're in that rut gets you out of it?
I like to keep myself busy. I think one of the challenges of lockdown was overthinking things quite a lot and sort of getting in your own head about things. But I think the way out of that is getting yourself in a routine. So for me, like I bought some weights. Like I started reading a lot more than I did in first year, which was really refreshing. And I think just having yourself that routine, so it gives you a sense of purpose. When you have a sense of purpose, it sort of distracts you from the thoughts of the world. And there's like quite because like a lot of times you know when you get like anxiety, if you've like been drinking or whatever, and you wake up and you just feel really anxious and stuff. I used to get that quite bad, but I saw this thing called like spotlight syndrome, which is essentially everyone thinks there's just a big spotlight on them and everyone remembers them for the rest of the world. But the refreshing reality is like people meet you for a few seconds and they'll forget about you quite quickly, and that's just fun because I'm more than content with that being the case, to be honest.
I think that is interesting, because I know for one, especially with a background in acting, it is really hard to shed that spotlight syndrome, and sometimes it becomes a little bit too all-enveloping. How do you focus empathy with self-preservation in an environment like your own, which is so combative because you're pushing yourself up for the future against your peers who also need a spot?
I like talk to my housemates, like we'll get along and watch TV or whatever, we'll chat about whatever. I think I'm quite lucky as well because my housemates are all like, they work quite hard, they're all independent, like I get along really well with them. They all sort of have the same perspective I do, so it's really handy for me, especially because like for the most part we're all on the same page, so it's quite nice to have that sense of everyone's sort of doing the same. It almost feels like a group effort. It's like everyone's got different things on at different times, but like everyone does work really hard in my house, and they're sort of like they share the similar outlook that I do.
It's good.
So that's really nice.
It's really nice that you can find a sense of community in a pack of individuals.
Being alone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because
it's really. Yeah.
Because I think that there's definitely a fear of going off somewhere else in the country or even the world in some people's cases, and forging ahead without that sense of belonging, and to be able to find that, I mean, that must be really nice. I think a question that I ask everybody, or that I haven't asked everyone, but I ask the majority of guests, because it's something that interests me, is that where do you stand on happiness? Is it something that can be objectified? Is it a sensation? What role does it play in your life, and how do you come across it?
I think I think for me, I like to appreciate happiness on a very small level to start with. Like, say, like I've just had a long day, been to the library or whatever, and then I'll come back and then maybe like my housemate Ollie will be making some food with me, or like we're going to watch Kong vs. Godzilla or something like that. And sometimes it's those little moments like in the busy days that I really like. But then I find happiness is also quite a big motivation for me. And sort of a lot of the motivation for me to sort of like be disciplined and like work quite hard is the thought of, oh, this temporary sacrifice is for sort of long-term happiness, like being able to be like financially comfortable, being able to be like satisfied with my job and things like that. So I'd say it's sort of twofold. I feel like in the present you need to just sometimes stop and appreciate it, but also try not to be settled or too immersed. Try and think like it's like, okay, like let's get on with it now. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I think that it's interesting because it's not per se that you objectify happiness so much as you put yourself in positions where you know that you will be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because I think that I often find myself, you'll be in a position, if I had this, if I do this, if I haven't.
Yeah.
Whereas it's less that so much as I know that feeling will come more if I'm not doing the other things or the inverse of those things. So I think that's some good advice and a healthy view to have. On kind of the juxtapository end and kind of the antithesis of that, what really scares you about the future? What keeps Joe up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Probably failure. It's quite deep. But I would say, like, I think that's a very healthy and important fear to have, because, like, everything that I've said have sort of been building upon it. A lot of it stems from, like, I don't want to fail, and I know failure will be necessary, and people learn a lot from failure. But at the same time from that, if you're afraid of failure, then you can still learn a lot because it's sort of like you're acting as if you have failed, if you fear failure, if that makes sense.
It does make
Not
sense.
100% of the time, but it's sort of like if the fear of failure drives you so much, are you not just acting as if you already have failed? And I know there's a slight difference in the sense that if you fail, there's sort of a liberation from that, but I don't want that liberation.
It sounds like a lot of pressure, though. It sounds like a lot of pressure to constantly be on that knife edge. You know what I mean? Even if it's one that's self-imposed. Because I think obviously success is such a personal concept, so therefore so is failure. And I think that, I do understand where you're coming from, but I do wonder whether that is actually quite a position of solitude, because failure to you may be abjectly different to failure to somebody else.
I definitely agree with that. I think I'm starting to learn that I can't really go 100% all of the time, which has been quite important for me, because I was pushing myself quite a lot when I'd be like doing whatever, my coursework or whatever, going to the gym, then rugby training and things like that, sort of be 100%, and then you do sort of need that break. So, but the thing is, that's just kind of my nature. I feel like I'm not really very good at taking breaks unless I physically have to.
A self-imposed work ethic that I think is very rare, and employers are going to love.
Oh, mate, I've had a horrible time with some of these applications. I was doing this one, and it was sort of a twofold test. It was inductive and deductive reasoning. So the first one, it was like, do you know, like an MCAT? So it's like all the patterns.
Yeah.
So I was doing one of them, and I thought it was going to be really hard, a lot harder than the deductive one, because I think I'm quite strong with like understanding words and verbal reasoning and things like that. So I thought, okay, so the inductive one's going to be the hard one, but after that I get to do the deductive one. And the inductive one went really well. I did the deductive one and just completely flopped it. But I didn't finish all the questions because it was all those ones where it was like, Paul only works Thursdays, Jane is on a conference for the first half of the month, Janet is like only in on Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, and then you have to sort of like marry it all up and like put them in the order, and I just completely froze up.
See, I feel like stuff like that is the kind of thing that everybody would be like, yeah, I could definitely handle that. But actually, there's something really, really terrifying about being put on a pedestal of communicator. Can you do it? Are you good at talking? Are you good at socializing with others? And I think that, for me, in my opinion, so much of that is not per se how you talk as much as how you listen. And nobody is perfect at listening because, well, there's a million things that are going to pull your attention at any one time. But I would say that for me, personally, the mark of a good conversation is that figure of eight and that energy of reception and emission.
And like bouncing off that, a lot of conversations are sort of like people making a statement about themselves, people hearing that statement, then making a statement about themselves, people hearing that statement, then making a statement about themselves. And it's sort of like we're still at stage one. Like there's no development. It's just people talking about themselves. Yeah, exactly. It's like there's no sort of like digging a bit deeper. It's just everyone has something. Everyone wants their voice to be heard. And the thing is, you don't learn by speaking, do you?
No,
like, you don't learn anything by sort of saying something that you already know about yourself to people who want to talk about themselves. So it's important to listen, my man.
Do you feel, from a philosophical perspective, then, that perhaps society is stagnating, or do you think that we have the sky as the limit, or maybe an ethical perspective?
I think society has become a lot more egocentric. If you think about people who have really successful careers off just like showing off their body or going on reality TV, obviously that's going to cultivate something where you sort of live just thinking about yourself, which to an extent is good, but also I think it's very limiting. I think it's a very bad principle to have across an entire society.
Do you feel that pressure of image then?
I personally, actually, I do. I'd like to say I don't, but I think we all do. I think it's like inherent within everyone nowadays. No, I don't think many people are completely confident.
Is divine confidence even
photos
possible?
And things like that? Yeah, exactly, mate. I think if you ask anyone today, if they said no, they'd be lying. To be honest with you.
And I think that there has to be something that's okay with that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
A study I was looking at recently, which kind of doubles back onto the meritocracy conversation, is this idea of the Kruger-Dunning effect, and people being mathematically overinflated in their own sense of ability to a degree that's impossible. The example is 60% of drivers believe that they are in the top 10% of drivers, top 10 percentile. Obviously, can't be the case. And it's that idea of, okay, so perhaps the reason that we have such an overinflated sense of self is because it's so often that just to be acknowledged, you have to promote that inner, I'm good at this, I'm competent, I can achieve this, I can do all of these wide array of things. And I think that kind of leads into my next question, which would be, what do you see most commonly? Because you're in a place of learning and growing and developing, and as such, a place with a lot of potential. What do you see that stops so many of your peers from reaching their full potential, or the barriers that they impose on themselves?
I think there's a sort of a very interesting dichotomy between people who sort of think they are very capable, because essentially we're all capable of a lot, aren't we? Like a lot of humans, like all humans have a lot of potential, but I think there is a very strong distinction between people who think that this potential is quote unquote God-given, sort of very natural, and it sort of doesn't require anything until you reach the point where you need to apply it. So like, oh, I'm good at this, so I don't need to revise it, or I'll get to my exam and I'll be fine. Versus the people that sort of have an outlook of, I have the potential to be good at this, but I need to sort of work hard at it and develop it to maximize my potential. And I think, especially since coming to university, I would say that most people fit somewhere between those two extremes.
I think it's interesting that you say that. So it's work almost is what limits people.
Yeah, essentially, because like everyone's capable of doing really great things and a lot of successful things, but it's nothing's. Once you get past a certain age, I don't think very much is natural at all.
Okay, that's interesting. I had this conversation the other day with a separate party, and it kind of led me to a question that I wanted to ask you. Accountability, with all of the socio life and all of the factors that make up your life, how accountable for your success are you?
I think I want to say completely. I understand that I'm not, but I think you have to have the mentality that you are to give yourself the best chance of success, because I think if you look for fault in like exterior factors, even if they are very real and very true, I still think you'll progress more if you put it all on your shoulders, and that sometimes can be quite a hard thing to do. But I think naturally for me, I don't really like making excuses that aren't otherwise like, oh, I didn't work hard enough, I didn't prepare well enough, because I don't learn anything if I say, oh, it was this person's fault, it was because of this, even though I understand that is there. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Is there a credit then lost, though, to the environmental factors that attribute to where you are now? Or do you think that that's something that you can take on the surface value and say, well, yes, I had this, but I still have the capacity to fail with that?
Yeah.
Or
I think you can. I definitely think you can learn that. I think it's sort of like reason X, an external reason, might be ultimately why you failed. So had you done everything the same and that had not happened, you would have succeeded. But I still think that failure should still prompt some sort of self-reflection and sort of prompt you to look within yourself and try and find what you could have done differently, because those factors are always going to be, it's almost random, I'd say, because you can't predict them, but they might be there, they might not. So if you work on the basis that there's going to be something out of your control, how can you put yourself in the best position to succeed?
I think rephrasing the question then, what about the innate positive factors, the gifts per se? Does that lessen a sense of achievement, or does it enhance it?
What, as in like things that just completely help you?
I mean, so say for example, does the idea that perhaps your socioeconomic background puts you in a more developed position and therefore elevates you to new heights, is that something that degrades a sense of achievement or accomplishment, or is that something that shouldn't even be equated with a sense of accomplishment and achievement? Is there an accountability there?
I think, okay, I understand. I think there is a sort of sense of accountability, sort of that like you can feel that that's a big contribution to it. And in all fairness, it might be a very big factor, but at the same time, I don't think you can really focus on that, because someone who ends up in your position could be someone of a low socioeconomic background or a higher one. I think it's something to sort of value if you come from like a good background, like we're lucky enough to do. But I don't think. I feel like you should understand your privilege, but I don't think you should necessarily let it diminish what you can achieve.
I think that's
so in the sense that if you overcome a lot more in terms of whatever background you come from, I think that makes success so much more sort of glorious. But I don't think I would like to think it wouldn't
degrade,
diminish. Yeah, exactly.
Look
Other
at us
people's
with our
success.
Synonyms. And I think it's interesting because there's even a biological component to the idea that a hormonal biochemical reaction in your body may trigger you to respond to a situation in a certain way, and therefore how accountable for that. So say, for example, you're an athlete, right? If you get a huge surge of adrenaline, or you innately have more testosterone, or I don't know, sports science, but the other biochemicals that put you in that position to succeed, are you therefore more worthy of the success that you achieve than somebody who is not a natural athlete, but someone who, through rigorous work and work ethic, and just drive and passion to win? And I think that, especially when we talk about potential, it's something that I find really interesting, because if you have those naturally predetermined factors and then you fall short of your potential, that to me feels like a worse failure, because you were in a position to succeed. So, would you say that you belong to the British equivalent of a fraternity?
In what sense?
In the social sense.
I don't know, because I associate fraternities with really ignorant frat boys that I've seen in like American film. So I would like to say in that sense, definitely not. But I would say in terms of a sense of like a community, people who share some of the values, then yeah, I guess I would in that sense.
And then just a few more quick fire questions. This one is completely irrelevant in the regards of the rest of the conversation. Where do you stand on AI, Joe?
Scared, because I don't understand it. I think one of the bigger fears that I have is sort of AI taking over a job market, or AI taking over the jobs that we need humans to do for the sake of money, everyone being able to make a living and things like that. Yeah.
I think it's.
But nice. I'm not completely opposed to it. I think in a lot of ways it's probably going to help us, but I think
in that way.
Yeah, because I don't understand it. I think I'm a lot more fearsome of it than most.
And then I guess lastly, because I feel like I've got a good chunk of time out of you here, I've got about 45 minutes of stuff. What would you like to see in future episodes?
Ooh, future episodes.
Yeah.
What do
you want out of the guests? What would you change about this process?
What would I change about the process? I don't know. I've really enjoyed it. I like it how there's no sort of. I like it how we've sort of let the conversation take us wherever it leads. I feel like something to think about if you're sort of starting to repeat yourself and the conversations are leading in the same way would maybe be sort of like a theme, ones that you can get people to sort of like bring some ideas and talk about. So you can talk about like whatever films you like, things like that. I think that's quite a good thing to do. But I've enjoyed the uncertainty of where we've been headed, Hamish.
Nice. And then, okay, in that case, what are your thoughts on the draft? Because I've been waiting to ask you about this outside of the podcast for a few days now. And now that you've brought that up, I'm dropping that on you.
Mate, I don't know why the Jets have taken Zach Wilson.
What? Right? Why didn't they take Justin Fields? He was right there.
I don't know how he fell to 11. I find it so odd how after all the pro days and how after they've all been evaluated, there are these just sudden narratives that just like completely throw
bombs.
people off.
Yeah, like Devontae Smith. He's too skinny.
Yeah.
He's too... Man, he won a Heisman. A wide receiver won a fucking Heisman. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a Bears guy. I know that you moved away. I like the players, not the teams. But you started as a Bears guy. You've got to be happy about Justin Fields.
I'm very happy for the Bears.
And I'm also happy for my Giants because it was a good trade.
Are you?
It was a good trade.
It was.
I think it was funny because Dave Gettleman came out. It was just hilarious. And because everyone was like, oh, fuck the Giants. They didn't take an O-lineman. And I really like Kadarius Toney. Kadarius, I think, has that spark and that it factor of he is going to be such a dynamic, hard to game plan against guy, you know? I think he really fucking you can do so much. You can put him in the backfield, you can return him, you can put him in the slot, you can put him outside. And I think he really brings a dynamicism to what was a really stagnant offense. Because I watched just last year and I was like, there's nothing to me more frustrating than receivers. Because in a zone where corners just sit on a route and then a receiver won't move around them because they either don't understand the route tree well enough to how to go around it. It's like, and that was just my Giants all last year. It would be run in a straight line, run in a slightly different straight line. Oh, there's a corner there. I give up. And I think it's interesting. But it was so funny to me because they said Dave Gettleman came out and was like, well, clearly we have more faith in our O-line than you guys do. And I was like, fucking obviously, everybody has been railing against you for like days. What do you mean? Yeah, but what was the steal of the draft?
The steal of the draft, that's a blooming question, that is. I'm very surprised that Najee Harris dropped to 24.
Yeah, I think he's going to
just in terms of the first round, I thought that was a very big pick for the Steelers. I thought they really needed them, so I'm very happy for the Steelers. To be fair, I'm quite like the fact that the Bengals drafted Jamar Chase.
Instead of Penisaur. That made me laugh.
I know.
I was like, oh my god, the Bungles. I mean, it's just LSU point 2 now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But I did sort of like it. It was sort of like, nah, we'll go for flair. We're going for like pure offense, no blocking. I don't care.
It's hilarious to me that a team based in Cincinnati is becoming so cool in its character and personality and has more life than so many other more interesting places. I think my worry for Najee is it's going to be a Saquon situation. No line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just going to get teed off on.
The Steelers should. Their O-line should perform though. In terms of experience and sort of like...
It's just so old,
I still feel like
Pouncey's gone too.
That's going to be harsh. That is going to be very tough. I wonder who the centre is now, actually. I'm not even sure.
Oh, no idea. And I think, for me, the draft is such a cool thing as just... Because for a day, it's all I care about. And then post... And actually watching it, I never watch it. I never watch it either. Why fucking bother? It's just ad breaks. But and Mel Kiper and his annoying Chandler Bing esque Fuck Mel Kiper. And I think that it works so well as a sport structure. Like, imagine how competitive global sports would be, and how easy it would be to get into global sports if that avenue was there for everyone.
Well, I've always thought sort of, when applying to English sport, you see so many people get chewed up and spit out of like the football system and things like that without having been going through like a proper education, quote unquote. So I think like I really like the idea of the athletes. I know they don't earn, but I still like the idea of them. They can earn now, can't they?
Yeah, they can profit finally off that likeness. Although they should be paid, but
they should be paid, but they can profit, which is even better still. But I still think, in terms of like scholarships that are being given out to players, that's so valuable, and like getting players their education before they get drafted, I think is something that a lot of English sports could benefit from.
And we have the university structure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like...
In terms of that, if you think about football, I think a lot of people sort of get snapped up when they're 14, when they're 15, and then as soon as they finish school, they sort of put everything into that. And while people succeed, a lot of people don't succeed. And you don't hear about the people that sort of leave the sort of system they have like really messed up knees or whatever, and they don't necessarily have a good fallback plan. So I think.
Sorry.
I was just saying, I think that's just something that I'd like to see implemented into the UK system.
I think this is, for me, the main sell, and everybody needs to take a moment and go and watch it, specifically this series. It's what I love about Last Chance U, you know? Because it's so much more about the people than the sport. And, I mean, looking at the effects of gentrification in Oakland could be an episode into itself, even though I've never even fucking been to Oakland and know what it was like before. I feel so emotionally attached to the people and their struggles there. And I think you are right, because if you think about the percentage of athletes that make it compared to ones that don't, and if you're ever looking for a series that has stunning visuals, great cinematography, John Beam is maybe the funniest personality ever. So definitely check that out. They did one on basketball as well, if you're not a football person. Plugging a show that I have no connection to aside, I would say you're right, and we have the institutions here to do it, which is even more frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. You think about how much money universities make.
Yeah. Or the FA, you know?
Yeah, or the FA, yeah, precisely, mate.
And actually, I guess the argument against it is, and the argument that I always hear against it is, but we've got a league-tiered structure, we've got a league-tiered system. But it's like, you may have a league-tiered system, but what education are you getting in playing in Blue Square Division? You know what I mean? You're not getting given the tools if it doesn't work out, and it is not for long. It's a microcosm of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Sell the NFL to me. Like a pen, sell the NFL to me.
Okay.
We'll go full Wall Street on it.
So what are you looking for in a sport, Hamish?
Action, strategy, fun.
I think some of the most sort of attractive concepts of the NFL and a lot of American sports, to be fair, is sort of the narratives. So like the player-by-player narratives, I think that's something that's quite lost on a lot of British sport. Maybe because of like the size of it in America and things like that, and the coverage of it. But a lot of the stories, the thing about Josh Jacobs was homeless for how long? Yeah, he lived in like a car. The sort of stories like that really make you get behind it. I think it's very explosive, and like the athletes are some of the best athletes you'll see in the world. I also think the fact that I've had this discussion before. The reason why there's so much NFL punditry, there's all of this, is because you can never there's so many factors, you can't ever put it down to one thing. That's what prompts all the discussion, and that's what makes it so exciting, that it's so hard to specifically analyse and determine who is responsible for a victory, who is responsible for a loss, and that's where we get all that.
Parts.
There's so many moving parts, yeah.
And actually, although it's complete folly, I think for me, there's so much fun in just, say for example, we could watch the same game and we'd be like, they lost because of this, and this. And I'd be like, whoa, no, they lost because of this, and this.
Yeah.
And
that discussion is, yeah.
And the fact that a sport can create that discussion just by existing, I think is a very cool thing. I think the problem that they have, though, is that with the squad size being so large, and with particularly the narratives being as strong as they are, and that's, for me, the big thing that sells it on as well. They're like gladiators, They look like space marines with all the fucking uniforms on. And there's something like, as a kid, just being like, oh my god, wow, look at the scale of this. There's so many people here. But I feel like when the negative narratives hit, it really, really kills newcomers who've seen NFL player, bam, 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 headline. And because of the squad size, there's so many cases like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is a real shame. It's a bit of a plague to it, isn't it? Especially when you see a lot of these players sort of sneakily sort of make their way back in without really a sense of justice. It's a bit.
Ezekiel Elliott, Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kareem Hunt. Like,
yeah, Jesus, fucking. I've seen the video. Really it's horrible. Bad. Oh my god.
Yeah.
But then I also feel that it is responsible for creating some of the best anchors and news personalities post the game, like OC and Jason, Shay Sharp. Who actually I now watch quite a lot. I don't watch Skip. I watch his independent stuff. How is Skip Bayless as rich as he is?
He gets up at 2 a.m. every morning. That's the most ridiculous thing. I'm like, what are you doing when you get up at 2 a.m.?
You've got like a 5-hour stretch of just nothing.
Yeah, I know. Like,
nobody's working out for 5 hours at 2 a.m. either. It's just so confusing. But then I guess that's quite real for people in America, that kind of idea that if you live in the West Coast, there is so much stuff going on in your field and your career path that happens before you even fucking get up. And because of how small our island is, I don't have to really worry about what people in Manchester are doing.
Exactly. I always think about this. I think I feel like that edge is something that's very powerful in America because of just the sheer size of it. If like the competition, the sense of competition must just be so inflated, and it must be just so much more sort of in the minds of everyone there. That's probably what.
Because you're competing coast to coast. You know, there's no. I'm gonna have a lie-in today because fuck it, why not? It's if I don't work on this in the stock market and I don't sell these shares, someone on Wall Street's gonna. That kind of leads on.
Oh, Hamish, but I was just gonna say, what is your view on stocks?
Oh, finally a question for me. You're the first person to ask me a question. I've had 2 guests on.
I want to know
great guests.
Still, I have a strong opinion on stocks, but I want to hear what yours is first.
What do I think of the stock market? I think that the stock market reflects the top 2% of people who dominate the stock market. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, I feel it's a very overinflated tool that's used to analyze how massive and enormous. Like, you know, penny stocks. You don't fucking hear about penny stocks reaching the Wall Street and how cataclysmically high they can go. You hear about Apple, an already giant of commerce, inflating its own sense of giantness by constantly showing up in the stock market as either green or red. You know what I mean? I don't understand it particularly, but that would be my first take. That might be completely uneducated.
But I would say I'm an educated, but not only am I an educated, I have absolutely zero desire to be educated on it. I find it so uninteresting. It's unreal. And I see these people who are like, oh yeah, but it makes you money. But I'm not. I just don't care.
Oh, I'm completely the same. I have to bleep his name out. It's all about the Bitcoin and the crypto right now. And I just don't want to learn about it. Like, it might give me the edge in the future to succeed and do all the things I want to do, but
I really don't care at all.
It's like Mark, though. I don't want to become Mark from the Peep Show, but just with stocks. You know what I mean? Because that, to me, what it would be, it would be the death of my own individuality as an artist. I can say that.
I would say, is there anything you've learned in the past few podcasts you've done about, actually anything like more tangible that you've actually educated yourself on, or is there anything you've learned about having to run a podcast and having to like continuously speak for quite a long amount of time?
I think it's interesting because I had no idea how mundane the research was going to be. Because when I first endeavoured on this, I thought that I would get clued up on all forms of psychology, I would learn so much about the way that the brain works and the person works. And actually, pretty much everywhere I looked, the unanimous answer was, no, you just got to listen. You just got to listen, you just got to commune. You know, it's not that fucking complicated, it's a podcast. Relax.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I really learned is when you're filling this much time, this is just an hour of communication and talking, the pressure absolutely has to be to not talk in the weirdest way possible. You need to be the focus of every episode. the fact that I'm even asking you this is obviously contradictory to that, or that I asked you to ask me something. But I think that a lesson that I've learned from this tangibly is that communication, yes, a lot of it is nonverbal, but a lot of that nonverbal communication is just sitting and letting somebody talk about what they care about what they're interested in. And then I was reading up on Larry King, and he said this, and I really felt this in this interview. I did in the last two, but I've definitely felt a sense of this because they were a bit more structured, because the guests were more specialized, right? You're a specialized because you're a lawyer, but I don't know anything about fucking law, and I might ask you. But I think the interesting thing that Larry King said was that it's about just having that intuition to think, okay, say you've gone on for too long, let's ask you something else. But that curiosity about you as a person should always be what drives that. And the idea that me just sitting and listening and learning about you, those moments of, oh, I want to ask another question, they'll come to me. You know what I mean? I've got to trust myself to know what I want to learn about you. But ultimately, I'm an ear. I'm literally like, you've got to be like a megaphone. You know, this is me projecting you to the public. So thank you.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was good.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I think that
it is.